So if you're already coming from Premiere Pro or Final Cut, then the Edit tab within DaVinci should feel pretty familiar to you. It consists of a timeline at the bottom, your preview window in the top right, media pool top left, and a window for your effects and effect controls. Now, DaVinci's Edit tab also has some additional features that make it stand out to me, which I'll be going over in this video. For my workflow, the Edit tab is basically where the main video starts coming together. I use the previous Cut tab to make my selects and cut out all the excess footage that I know I'm not going to be using. That way, when I'm ready to start piecing together my main video in the Edit tab, I don't have to spend so much time sifting through hours and hours of footage. Everything is already cut up and ready to be thrown into my main timeline. And of course, because I took the time to make selects, I'm now more familiar with all of the footage, which will allow me to navigate the project much faster. Now, before I show you guys my process of piecing together my main timeline, let's first jump into the Edit tab and see what it has to offer. So the Edit tab is the third tab down here on the bottom, and we can quickly access it by pressing Shift 4. Remember, Shift 2 through Shift 8 allow us to go through all the different tabs down here, and Shift 1 brings up the Project Manager, Shift 9 brings up Project Settings. Good shortcuts to know. But this is what we see when we open up the Edit tab. Now we have the familiar media pool up here in the top left where we can access all of our footage. In the top left, we have the ability to close off this bin list over here. So we can press that, close that off. Gives us more room to actually see our media over here. We can also change the way that we view our media from list view to thumbnail view. And of course, we have the metadata view as well over here. Of course, we got to be over some footage to actually see any kind of metadata. I usually keep it in list view, but that is the media pool, pretty much the same thing that we've been looking at for the first two tabs of DaVinci. I'm just going to go back to the root folder over here so we can see all of our folders. And the really cool thing is we can actually hide the media pool when we don't want to be using it simply by just pressing the media pool button up here. When it's grayed out, that means it's inactive, and when it's white, that means it's active. And if we want to expand it, we can press the button to the left of media pool over here and it'll expand it to fill the whole left section. So this is great when you are maybe just going through lots of footage and you want to see all the stuff inside of your folders. Maybe you haven't made selects yet, so then you can just view everything. You could probably put it in, thumbnail view, get a better idea of where everything is, and you can just start dragging clips in like this. I guess that's more of a route you would go if you didn't already make selects, but in my case, I've already made selects, so there's no need to have the media pool even visible really. Now, next to media pool, we have effects library. This is pretty much the same effects window that we saw back in the cut tab, except now we have the titles and transitions all grouped into here as well. So titles and transitions are not their own separate tabs. You'll find them over here to the left. It's pretty straightforward. There's tons of options in here, and you can just hover your mouse over top of anything to get a bit of a preview in our preview window. And of course, if there's something that you find yourself constantly going back to, hit that little star button and it's going to add it to your favorites over here. It's definitely really important for you to not spend time typing in the same effect every time to go access it. Make sure that you favorite it so that it's very easily accessible over here to the left, so you're not wasting time. Next to effects library, we have edit index, and this is going to show us everything in our timeline from start to finish. So it just puts things into chronological order. So if I go back to the media pool, I can open up one of the timelines that I cut together. So let's do kelp forest dive, and we can see that it's opened up down here. So if we go back to our edit index, we can see all of our clips in our timeline in chronological order. So if I wanted to quickly jump to one of them, I can simply just press that one and get the playhead instantly to that one clip. Except in this situation, this isn't really going to be handy because there's no metadata for each one of these clips, and there's no way for me to know based on the name or any of this information what is actually in the clip. So, if you did go through the process of adding metadata or, choosing a color for your clip, then it would make sense for you to use the index a bit more often. But in this situation, the edit index doesn't really help, but it's good to know that we have that option there. Next to the edit index is the sound library. Now, I primarily do my sound design stuff in Fairlight, which is the second last tab over here. But of course, we're able to do a lot of sound design in the edit tab as well. And the sound library is awesome because it allows you to very quickly access any kind of sound files on your computer. Okay, let's hide the sound library and take a look at our preview window over here. So something really cool that we can do to move around this space is to hold the middle mouse button on our mouse, and we can move our image around. We can also zoom in and out just using the scroll wheel. And this is really helpful because a lot of the time you're going to want to see past the edges of your image when you're doing things like masking or you're overlapping two videos on top of each other and you want to move things around. It's nice to be able to just zoom out like that. And it's also really nice to be able to move around by clicking and holding the middle mouse button on the mouse. Now in the top left, we have the ability to quickly jump to different zooms of our image. So if we press fit, it's going to scale everything to fit to the preview window size. So in the bottom left of our preview here, we have some options down here that allow us to change how we interact with our preview window. So the first one is transform. If we enable it by making it white, we can see that we now have the ability to transform our image in the preview. So we can scale it up. We can also rotate it by using this middle handle over here. You can freely move your image around over here. This is great for reframing. Sometimes you might want to crop in on your image and just focus on like one section. There might be a lot of dead space. This is a great way to very quickly do this. Instead of trying to change all of these parameters over here in your inspector, it'll definitely be much faster to make any kind of zoom or position changes in the actual viewer itself. And if you want to go back to normal, you can just press the reset in the transform section right here, and it'll bring it back to its original position. Now, if we press the little arrow next to the button over here, then we can choose some different options. We have the ability to crop, so we can crop the sides of our image as well, just like that. Makes it much faster, much easier. And of course, we can reset it over here as well in the inspector. If we press the drop down again, we can choose things like dynamic zoom, which we learned about in the cut tab, which is an amazing feature. So same kind of thing here. We're able to choose the start and end frame, and we will be able to animate from that start and end frame automatically. We don't have to do any more work. This is everything. And if we want to enable it, we got to make sure that dynamic zoom is enabled right here, because sometimes you might have these rectangles set, but it's not going to be animating between those scales and positions because dynamic zoom is turned off over here in the inspector. So you got to make sure that it is turned on. And of course, just like in the cut tab, you have the option to choose between different animation styles right here. And below that, we have the swap button, which just swaps the rectangles in the preview here. And below dynamic zoom, we have some other options here, which we will be talking about later on in this course. But we can also find the familiar annotations option down here as well, which we learned about in the media page, which allows us to add markers to our clip, as well as add actual visual elements on top of our image. I'm just going to zoom into my clip and delete that marker because we don't need that. Now, if I want to bring my preview window back to its original mode, I can simply just click on this button over here to disable it. And I'm just going to scale this to fit the frame size. In the top right of our preview window, we have the bypass color grades and fusion effects button. So if we press this, it's basically going to disable any kind of color grades that are on it. And because we have a LUT on the timeline node tree for this timeline over here, we're able to see a change in color when we turn off the color grades here. This is a great tool to very quickly be able to see what your original footage looked like. So if you're deep into an edit, you've done lots of color grades and stuff, you want to see how much progress you've made on a certain clip, you can just click on this clip to reveal what it looked like before you did any kind of color grading or added any kind of fusion effects. And at the top of the preview window, we have this drop down that lets us see all of the open timelines within our project. Right now, we're not seeing every single timeline from the project because some of them are closed. We have to open them first. So we're only seeing the timelines that are open within the project. And if you ever want to switch to another timeline, you can simply just select it and it'll take you to that timeline. Let's go back to our original timeline. Now, the really cool thing about viewing timelines in the Edit tab is that we have some options as to how we want to view them. So if we press this button over here, this is the timeline view options. We can see that stack timelines over here in the top left is enabled. I really like to work with this on because it allows me to see all of my different timelines like this in a tab form. And I can also stack my timelines on top of each other and see more than one at a time. Now, when you're first working in DaVinci, you'll probably have this turned off. So it's going to look more like this, but you can very quickly turn it on simply by going over there, clicking stack timelines, and now we have the ability to add tabs for each one of our different timelines over here. So I opened up a new tab here and I can select another one of my timelines that's currently open in the project. So let's choose this one over here. And we can see that the timelines that are already open over here to the left are grayed out, so we can't select those. Now you guys can see there's a little bit more going on in this timeline. I got some markers and I got videos in different tracks over here, but you'll be learning about exactly what's going on over here in the refining your select video. So I can just keep opening up my timelines next to each other. And this is awesome because I can very quickly just go between any of my timelines just like that. Now, you're probably thinking, yeah, that's cool, but can you view 2 timelines at the same time? And that's one thing that I thought really sucked about Final Cut, is that you couldn't see more than one timeline at a time. So I'm really stoked that DaVinci does give us this option, and it's really easy. We just press this button in the top right of our timeline over here, and it gives us a new timeline down here. Now, we can open up even more tabs for this second timeline view down here. But if we want to move one of the tabs from up here to the bottom timeline, we'll have to close it up here first, and then we can access it down here. Now, if we want to add another timeline, we can do that as well, simply by pressing that same button over here. Now we have 3 timelines stacked on top of each other. 3 timelines is pretty tight. I still haven't found the need to do this. 2 timelines usually does the trick for me. If we want to close one of these timelines, we can press the button to the left over here, and it's going to close the timeline. So I love working with stacked timelines because I can bring all of my selects to the timeline up above, bring my main video down below, and I can just start dragging clips from the top timeline to the bottom one and building out my main edit down here. You guys will see me go through this exact process later on in the course. Now I'm going to close this second timeline over here as well, and I want to show you guys some of the options that we have within the timeline here. So each one of these are tracks. These are audio tracks down here below in the green, and we got video tracks up above. We have the ability to mute or solo each one of these tracks down here in the audio section. So if we want to play one track over here by itself without anything from the other tracks down here, we can solo it. So that will basically mute everything else and just let this one track play. Or we can choose to mute it, which will mute that track and play all the other tracks. And over here, we have this little lock button, which will allow us to lock the track. So any changes that we make to any other clips in the timeline will not affect those clips in that specific track. Same goes with video over here. It's got this same lock button. So if we have that selected, we can't accidentally move something over or make any changes to that track. It's locked in place. I'm just going to press Command Z twice to bring us back. And up here on the video tracks, we have the ability to disable each track individually. I personally don't really use this because if I ever need to disable a specific clip, I'll just press D on my keyboard. That's the Ravenclaw keyboard shortcut for disable, and it will disable it. I rarely find myself having to actually disable a full track, but we have the option here if we ever need to. Now, between our preview window and our timeline, we have some tools and options over here. So to the left, we have different options for what we want our cursor to do. So to the left, we have selection mode, which is the default, which allows us to select clips like this and just move things around normally. Next to that, we have trim edit mode. The Ravenclaw keyboard shortcut for this is T. So when we press T, we can see that our cursor has changed into the trim edit mode. And now let's take a look at how we can interact with our clips with this tool on. So if I trim this clip, make it shorter, we can see that it is also moving everything to the right with it as well. Now, the reason the audio wasn't trimmed down with it is because we have that track locked over here. So let's unlock it. So now if we drag the right of this clip over, we can see that it's not only trimming this clip, but it's also moving everything to the right over with it. If we were to do this with the standard selection tool, shortcut is A, we can see that it would leave a gap for us. So using trim mode allows us to bypass the need to have to delete that gap afterwards. So yeah, I find that the trim mode definitely helps save a lot of time in a lot of situations. With trim mode, we can also hover between clips and move the start and end points of those clips like this. So not only are we expanding this clip here, we're shrinking the clip next to it. This can be a great tool if you're trying to line up the cut between 2 clips to a point in a song, and you can do that very easily like this instead of having to, first line up the first clip with the beat and then move the second clip over. We are able to very quickly move that cut point to anywhere that we want. Now also with the trim tool selected, we are able to slip our clips left and right. And basically what that means is we can maintain the same duration of the clip, but change the actual part of the clip that is going to stay within this duration here. So if I click on this upper half of my clip and drag left and right, we can see that the duration of the clip stays the same and it stays in the same place within the timeline, but I'm actually changing what part of the clip we are using. This is awesome to have when you have your clips cut up to your music already. So all your clips are the right duration and they're in the right place on your timeline, but maybe you just want to change the actual part of the clip that you want to use. You can simply just use trim edit mode to slip your clip back and forth to choose a different part of the same clip. Now, next to trim edit mode, we have dynamic trim mode, which personally I haven't really used because I don't really see how it's better or why I would use it over trim mode. So I'm not going to be going over it in this video. In my personal editing workflow, I wouldn't really use dynamic trim mode. Trim edit mode works great for me. And to the right, we have the blade tool, which is something that I never, ever use. But if you do want to use it, you can just press B on your keyboard and it will turn your cursor into a blade and you can cut wherever your mouse is. What I prefer to do is simply just to drag my playhead to wherever I want to cut and just press W. That's always been my method, but I actually do have some friends that prefer to use the blade tool. So if that's your thing, you can press B, change your cursor to a blade tool and cut up whatever you want. Now, next to our cursor tool options over here, we have a couple different options as to how we want to insert the selected clip from our media pool into our timeline. So let's take a look at how these work. So I'm just going to open up the media pool over here and I'm going to select any clip here. Actually, let me first just zoom in on my timeline so we can get a better view of what's going on here. So I'm going to select a clip from my media pool here. And just for example's sake, let's set an in and out point over here. 4 for in, 5 for out. And of course, we can simply just click and drag to drop the video into our timeline. But these buttons down here are like shortcuts as to how you would want to bring this clip into your timeline. Now, also take note that we have the ability to just drag the video over here or the audio separately. So if we just wanted the audio, we can click and drag the audio right here down into the audio tracks. Same with the video. Now let's try this first button over here. If we hover over top of it, it says insert clip. So let's insert this clip over here. Cool. And we can see that it inserted the clip exactly where the playhead was. So the playhead was in the middle of this clip over here. So we can see that it actually split that clip in half, and we can see that it inserted that clip in between that first clip. Now take note that because we used this option, we didn't lose any footage. Nothing was overwritten. It just pushed everything over to the right and inserted the clip exactly where the playhead was. So I'm just gonna click on this clip to reveal it in the media pool again. Let's open it up here. And let's try this again, but instead of inserting, let's try the second option here, which is overwriting. So I'll go to a different part of the timeline here. And I'm gonna go back to the clip that we just inserted in my timeline, and let's press overwrite. So we can see that it kind of did the same thing, but the clips weren't pushed over. It didn't like make room for the clip and then bring it in. It just placed the clip over top of the clips that were here at this point in the timeline. So wherever the playhead sits, it's just going to place it there, but it's not going to push everything over. So it basically deletes the clips that were already here. I'm just going to hit Command Z. So we can see that this clip was originally this long, but because we chose the overwrite option, it just cut out a lot of it. And all we're left with is this little portion right here. And lastly, we have the replace button. So let's just go to a different part of our timeline over here. So with the same clip selected in our media pool, let's press replace. And we can see that it replaced the clip that was at this part of the timeline. It kept the same duration as the clip that was here, but it replaced what was inside. So if we hover over to a different clip and go back to that original clip in our media pool, let's press replace again. We can see that the original clip's duration stays the same, but it's replaced with the contents of whatever we have in our preview window here. So if we hover our mouse over top of these shortcuts over here, we can see that the keyboard shortcut for each of them is F9, F10, and F11. Now, we also don't even need to use these shortcuts right here. We can simply just drag our clip over from our media pool over top of our preview window, and we can see to the right over here, we have a bunch of different options as to how we want to insert that clip into our timeline. So here we can see that we have even more options, but we also have those same insert, overwrite, and replace options right here. So if I press insert, we can see that it's inserted that entire clip over here and pushed everything over. You can see that we have some other options here as well, including place on top, which is a great one. So if you don't want it to sit on the same track as everything else, you can just drop it on place on top and it will add that clip over top of everything else. We can also choose append at end, which will bring your clip to the very end of your clips in your timeline. And then at the bottom here, we have ripple overwrite, which will overwrite the clip that the playhead is currently over top of and replace it, but also ripple everything. So if we were to have some random clips selected here in our timeline and I was to ripple overwrite it with another clip, let's see what happens. It replaces that clip and changes it with the full length of the clip that I just dropped in from the media pool. So it's great to know that we have all those different options as to how we want to drop our footage from our media pool into the timeline down below. Next to those 3 buttons, we have 3 more buttons. The first one is snapping. I turn this one on and off all the time when I'm going through my timelines. And basically what it does is it changes the way that the playhead behaves when you're scrubbing through your clips. If snapping is turned on, then whenever you're close to the start of a clip or any one of these cut points, the playhead's gonna snap to that place. We can see that as I get close, it kind of just snaps into place there. And this can be very useful in a lot of situations, but honestly, sometimes it could be annoying. So it's good to know the shortcut to turn it on and off whenever you want. And for Ravenclaw, that's F. F will quickly turn it on and off. So now you can see that because it's off, I'm able to get closer to those cut points and not have any snapping going on. I'm just going to turn it back on by pressing F. Now, next to snapping, we have linked selection. Now, when linked selection is on, when you have a piece of media selected, it's going to automatically select the video and audio file. Now, if we unselect the clip by pressing into our timeline and we turn linked selection off, we can press G, that's the shortcut, then we can see now we can freely select either the video file or the audio file. So they're not linked now and we can easily move things around. So if we want to move the audio file by itself or the video file, we can do that. And you can see that once we've done that, we have this little red label on each one of these clips. And that's pretty much there to let us know that the video and audio from this clip have been separated in the timeline. And the number tells us the distance between both of those. So as we take things further away, we can see that this is now 23 seconds behind where it should be to be aligned with the audio file. So I'm just going to undo that, Command Z. Now, next to linked selection, we have position lock. And with this enabled, we basically can't move anything in our timeline. Everything is locked in place. This can be useful in some situations, maybe when you are showing your project to someone else and you don't want them moving something accidentally. You could just turn that on and they can freely go through your timeline without worrying about moving anything or making any kind of changes. So I'm just going to turn position lock off. And next to that, we have 2 other options here. We have flags and we have markers. Now, both of these are kind of similar, but at the same time, they are different. Let's start off with flags. So if I have a clip selected in my timeline and I hit the flag button, we could see that it's added this little flag here. Now we can see that it's also added a flag to the clips next to it as well. And that's because those clips are the same clip. I just cut up the same clip and these are different segments of that same clip. We can verify that by actually reading the name of the clip down here. We can see it's 171055, same with this one and this one. So because we've added a flag to that one clip, it's added it to all the other versions of that same clip in the timeline. With a flag, we're also not able to mark a specific point on a clip. So if I was to, want to add a flag to this part of the clip and I select the flag button, it's not going to do anything because the flag's already been applied there. So you're kind of just labeling the clip as a whole by using a flag. Now we can add multiple flags to individual clips. You can just hit the drop down here, select a different color, and now we have a blue and yellow one on these clips. Adding flags is really useful, especially when you get to the stage of color grading in the color tab. You can filter out your entire timeline here and just see the flagged clips as well as the marked clips with markers as well. But you can filter it here, so we can choose any flag. And that way we can see only the clips that we've flagged or added markers to, which is great because it isolates those from the rest of the clips in the timeline and we can just focus on those specific clips. So let's go back into our edit tab. Now also, if we want to add information to any of these flags, we can just double click on them. We can add a note. And if we press done, we can see that we have a little black circle on top of our flag, and that indicates that that flag contains some information. Now, in my personal workflow, I don't really use flags as much. I'll just delete these here. What I use a lot more are markers, and I don't even really use this marker button here. The shortcut to add a marker anywhere on your timeline is M. When I press M, we can see that a marker has been added up here in our timeline. Now, the reason it was added to the timeline and not the clip was because I made sure that the clip wasn't selected. I just clicked into my timeline over here. If I do have the clip selected and I hit M, we can see that it's added a marker over here. Now, it only added it to the video because we have linked selection turned off. So I'm just going to hit Command Z, undo that. Let's hit G to turn linked selection on. And now when we have our clip selected and we hit M, we've added a marker to both the video and audio tracks. Now, if we double click on the marker or hit M again when our playhead is over top of it, we can name it. Let's call this housing shot because we can see that there's a housing here, and maybe I want to add a note to an editor or to my future self. Use this shot for BTS intro, maybe. This is great for leaving notes for yourself or other editors about ideas that you have or things that you want to do in your timeline. You can even add narration, things like that in this way. You'll see later on in the Refining Selects video how I use markers to easily define what's BTS footage and what is my main footage. We can also change the color of the marker over here. And we could also change the duration, but I don't change the duration over here. The easiest way to change the duration is to actually click on the marker right here. You can hold Option on your keyboard and you can drag it out. Now we can do the same thing up here with the markers on the timeline as well. This could be very useful if you want one marker to cover the span of a longer period of time in your timeline to maybe indicate what a group of clips is, or what you want a segment of your timeline to have in it. Maybe there's footage that you need to shoot and you can use a marker to highlight a section of your timeline to show that you need to shoot clips for that segment of the timeline. We can also see in this marker down here, we have that black dot. The reason it's there is to indicate that that marker has some extra information. So if we double click on it, we can see what that extra information is. And if we ever want to delete markers, we can simply just select them, hit delete, and it's as easy as that. And lastly, we have some zoom options over here. So if we press the first button, we can see that it's scaled the entire timeline to fit all of our clips so we can see everything. Next to that, we have detail zoom, which just zooms in a lot more. And then after that, we have custom zoom, which we're able to set over here to the right with this slider over here. So if we bring it to full zoom, we can go back to detail zoom and then bring it back to that full zoomed in mode. So I don't really use these to navigate my timeline, but they are there if you ever want to use them. The way that I like to navigate my timeline is with Shift, Command, and Option. Now I'm just gonna close the media pool so we can focus more on our timeline over here. So if I hold Shift and scroll with my mouse wheel, we can see that I'm expanding the video tracks. Now that's because my mouse is over top of the video tracks. If I bring it over top of the audio tracks, I could do the same thing. So holding Shift and scrolling up and down allows me to change the size of all of the tracks in my timeline. That's one that I use all the time, especially when you're working with a bunch of different tracks here. You have footage on top of footage. You want to make those tracks smaller sometimes so you can see all of those layers. But if you're just working with one track and you want to get some more visual thumbnail on each video, you can make it bigger just like that. Now, if I hold Command and scroll, I'm able to scroll left and right in my timeline. That's awesome, and I use it all the time. Option allows me to zoom in and out, just like that. So with those three shortcuts, I'm able to very quickly and easily navigate my timeline, and I use them all the time. Now to the top right, we have three more windows that we can activate. The first one is the mixer. Now I'm going to be diving deep into the mixer and how it works in the Fairlight section of the course. But all you really need to know is that each one of these sections here is for each individual track. So right now we have 3 tracks. And if we ever want to add another track, we can simply just right click over here, select add track. Most of the time we're going to be working in stereo. So we have a 4th track. And if we move this over, we can see that we've now created another section for the 4th track that we just created. And in here, you can change the volume of each track individually. This is great for mixing because then you don't have to go into each one of your individual audio files and change the volume like this. You can simply control the entire track just with this one slider. And you can also apply effects to entire tracks and change like things like the EQ over here. We have tons of different options as to how we can manipulate the track, but this information is not that important right now. We're going to be diving deep into this in the Fairlight section of the course. But for now, it's good to know that we have the mixer here and we can make those kind of changes right in the edit tab. So I'm just going to deactivate the mixer. Let's go to the next one, metadata. This basically just lets us know of the information about this selected clip within our timeline. So we can go to any clip over here. and it'll tell us the format, the frame rates, the codec, the audio information, and the resolution. So personally, I don't really use the metadata tab that often, but if you ever need to know something about your clip, you can very quickly just open it up and just get the information about the selected clip in your timeline. And next to that, we have the inspector. This is the exact same inspector that you'll find in the cut page, where we can access all of the controls to modify the properties for the selected clip. So in the top, we have transform, where we can change the zoom, position, rotation, all that kind of fun stuff. It's the same inspector as what we have in the cut tab. And these tabs over here are not enabled. We can't press them because this is only a video file. There's no audio. We also don't have any effects on it. We don't have any transitions. So as soon as we apply an effect to this, we apply a transition, those will enable and we'll be able to click into them. And this clip doesn't have audio either. So let's go to a clip that does have audio and make sure linked selection is turned on by pressing G. That way, when we select a video file, it will also select the audio file. We can see that the audio button here is enabled and we can make any kind of audio changes that we want over here. And we have the same file button as what we have in the cut tab, which allows us to see the metadata as well as change some of the metadata over here as well. And lastly, we have the volume control over here, which allows us to quickly mute and unmute the audio in our timeline or whatever's playing back. And we can also press this dim button over here, which basically just brings the overall volume down. So this is great if you are maybe hanging out with other people and you're both watching the same edit and you want to talk about it as it's playing. You can press dim so it'll play back a lot quieter, or you can just turn off the volume overall just by pressing the mute button over here. Awesome. So that's it. I hope you guys enjoyed this little intro into the edit tab. Over the next series of videos, I'm going to be diving into pretty much every single feature found in the edit tab and showing you guys my exact workflow in here. It's going to be exciting. I definitely recommend that you guys open up DaVinci yourselves. Just throw some footage in there, experiment with the user interface, experiment with the effects. Just start experimenting because the more time you put in, the better you're going to be. So that's it for this video. I hope you guys enjoyed. I hope you learned something new, and I'll catch you in the next one.